This is the Cubs-related podcast presented by CubsInsider.com. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on a Sunday evening after watching the Cubs get swept at the hands of their rival St. Louis Cardinals at Busch Stadium. The Cubs fall to 2-8 in their last 10 games, which, if you're keeping track, is worse than how they started the season at 2-7, so that's super fun. So we will talk about those three games. We'll break those down real quickly. I'm assuming that most of you guys, much like Brendan and I, don't need to relive a hearty recap of this three-game series, but we'll cover the news and notes and what was important in these three games. We're going to talk about the offensive inconsistencies, talk about some bullpen rumblings going around. Pedro Strop pitching in his third rehab appearance for the Iowa Cubs, so he is likely nearing a return to the Cubs bullpen when they get back to Wrigley Field on Monday. And we are also hearing that all of a sudden, Brendan, as the draft approaches and that compensation pick may no longer be attached, the Cubs may have a newfound interest in one Craig Kimbrel. So
Shocker. Yeah.
Right. We will talk about that and the potential of that and the ramifications if they were to do that. And we will also take a look at three good starts from the Cubs rotation this weekend. Jose Quintana, Darvish, and Cole Hamels all pitching quite well for the Cubs in this three-game set. But unfortunately, the offense did not join them this time. So lately, it feels like it's been a pick-your-poison kind of thing for the Cubs. Either the offense shows up and the pitching does not, or the pitching shows up and the offense does not. But such is life. So let me just run through these games. The Cubs lose Friday and Sunday by a score of 2-1. In both of those games, the Cardinals get at least one run without getting any hits. So that's great, and something that definitely didn't piss me and Brendan off to the point that, we've been talking about it for 3 days here. We're totally fine about that, guys. It's fine. But on Friday, the Cubs losing 2-1 in 10 innings. Darvish with the only RBI for the Cubs in this game on a sacrifice fly. Darvish was good in this one. He goes 6 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned, 3 walks, and 6 strikeouts for Darvish. He throws 93 pitches, lifted for a pinch hitter as the Cubs are trying to get some offense going. And the Cardinals winning this one in the bottom of the 10th on a Matt Carpenter single. It was basically a fly ball that the Cubs gave up on because they had the 5-man infield and the bases were loaded. So once it gets that far in the outfield, it's whatever. So it goes down as a single. We could probably talk about the umpiring in this particular game. It could be a robo-umps or whatever, human element discussion if we wanted to, but when you get swept at the hands of the Cardinals, it just sort of feels disingenuous to spend that much time on the umpires. But I will say, decidedly, Brendan, and I didn't run this by you, but I assume you support this. We have a lot of friends of the podcast that we've noted over the years. Laz Diaz is not one of them.
No.
Okay? I want that noted. Laz Diaz, you are not a friend of the Cubs-related podcast. I might direct you to a Sunglass Hut or a Lenswear, whatever eyeglass store, you might be able to get
Nationwide Vision, get your eyes checked. Yeah.
Really bad. And
not
unfortunate
good, no.
for Dylan Maples, who really deserved better than that. But again, you get swept, not the time to really complain about the umpires. On Saturday, this one, an odd one because the game is tied at 2. As we head to the bottom of the 5th inning, we get a multiple-hour rain delay, and then when the game resumes, the Cubs bullpen, decides to open things up a little bit. Tyler Chatwood taking the loss in this one, 2 innings, 5 hits, 3 earned, no walks. He does strike 1 out, but the no walks thing isn't as exciting when you're giving up 5 hits and 3 runs. Kyle Ryan eventually comes in later in the game. He goes 2/3 of an inning, giving up 3 hits, 2 earned, and back-to-back home runs to Dexter Fowler and Harrison Bader. The Cubs getting their runs in this one. Anthony Rizzo's 16th home run, Jason Hayward's 9th home run, and a David Bodie double, a Chris Bryant force out in the top of the 7th. Some bad BABIP luck there. Chris ripped that ball up the middle. It happened to glaze off of Andrew Miller's glove right to Paul DeJong. Isn't that super convenient for the Cardinals? And it's only a run-scoring force out instead of a single up the middle, but such is life. Again, the final on Saturday, 7-4 Cardinals. And again, the Cubs losing 2-1 on Sunday to Adam Wainwright. Brendan, so that was fun. Adam Wainwright throws, seriously, 126 pitches over 8 innings. He gives up just 2 hits, no earned runs, while walking 7 batters and striking out 8. So, yeah, that was the story in that one. Unfortunately, in this one, Cole Hamels, he bounces back with a really good start after, not his best stretch with the Cubs. He goes 7, only 2 hits allowed, an unearned run, 2 walks, and 4 strikeouts. So Cole Hamels was really, really good in this game. He only throws 84 pitches. So again, much like Darvish on Friday, he was lifted in an effort to try and score runs. He could have gone longer, and he was phenomenal in this game. So a lot of no decisions for the Cubs starters in this series that were not particularly deserved. And just since I didn't read it, he was taken out after the rain delay. But Quintana goes 4 innings, gives up 4 hits, 2 earned, 1 walk, and 6 strikeouts on Saturday, again before that rain delay.
Yeah, and I thought he looked pretty good there, too.
Great lines really all around for the Cubs starters in this series, and it just was not enough for this offense to come through. So, again, the Cardinals winning 2-1 on Sunday. The Cubs trying to rally in the top of the 9th when they trailed 2-0, but they would not be able to push across the tying run. So they do get swept, Brendan. And I will throw it to you, and I think the first thing to discuss, at least just coming out of this weekend, is, we find ourselves in a 2-8 stretch, which, we go back to how bad we felt, or, just how not fun that first week of the season was. And this has somehow been now a game worse than that stretch in terms of the losses. But this weekend, unlike some of the other ones that we saw, really the issue was offensive consistency. The hitting with runners in scoring position issue continues to plague the Cubs. I'm looking here on Friday. They go 0 for 8 with runners in scoring position, 1 for 4 on Saturday, and that one hit did not bring in a run. That was the Descalso bunt that goes for a single past Andrew Miller, but it doesn't bring in a run. And then on Sunday, they go 0 for 4. So just a big mess with runners in scoring position, and an overall frustrating weekend for the offense. And I think particularly for me, Brendan, you can't have that type of performance against Adam Wainwright. Adam Wainwright, at this stage of his career, going 8 innings against you, and you getting 7 walks, but not being able to push anything across the plate, and letting him work out of jams over 120 pitches, Brendan. Like, that is particularly frustrating.
Yeah, the series was frustrating as a whole. I mean, I'm there watching the game, and, we're all talking about the same problems that we've been talking about for 3 years now. And the main issue that I think we come back to is this runners in scoring position phenomenon. Like, why on earth over the past 3 years can the Cubs seemingly not put up base hits when there's runners on second or third? And yeah, I'm with everyone else. That is frustrating. There are good things that continue to happen for this team recently. And just to get beyond that, the Cubs still have one of the best offenses in Major League Baseball. You exclude the pitching slot, and their overall WOBA is .351. They're batting .264, and you're right on par with the Dodgers. And the only other better team in Major League Baseball than the Cubs and Dodgers is the Minnesota Twins offensively. So there's a lot to be happy about and stoked about for the future, but there are going to come times, like we just saw in St. Louis, when they can't put it together. And the fact that this team has been so good offensively the entire year doesn't exclude the fact that these inconsistent stretches are problematic. And I think at some point, this being the third year, you have to ask yourself, what is going on here? Why does this team go through these inconsistent bouts? You've had 3 hitting coaches. The Cubs have really forced upon themselves opportunistic hitting and replaced the situational hitting word that we've heard so frequently. So they've made it more of a point of emphasis to address this. And we just don't see it at times, and I don't think I have a good answer for that. I do think, in part, one of the reasons why we saw this inconsistency recently was because they have a lack of depth. And so Javi Baez clearly is struggling with that ankle injury. Mm-hmm. Chris Bryant went down after the collision, missed a few games, came back. They have maybe a depth issue right now. Descalso has looked continuously like garbage. Ben Zobrist, more and more we hear about it, he may not be back this year. So you're looking at a team right now that's depleted. When you have Jim Aducci up with this team right now, who's vying for a World Series, you know they're depleted. When they go out and they sign Carlos González, you know they're depleted. And so that's really the issue that we have going on here, is at one, you can look at the overall numbers and they look phenomenal. They look great. And I think it gives us a lot of confidence going forward. On the other hand, you watch the performance they just had this week, and it does make you question whether or not you can expect this going forward. Where I am at, I'm sort of in the middle in between being very confident and, being a little concerned. And it kind of leads off our last episode where we talked about the outfield depth and the consequences of not having that depth. And I hate to say it, but you just saw it this past series. You saw what the consequence is when not only do you not have depth, but if you have one small injury, Corey, one small injury, even for a few days with Javi being out, it messes everything up, and you really just completely startle that entire depth, and that can be problematic.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think that we need to be careful not to throw an entire body of work that this offense has done so far this season in the garbage because they're in a bad stretch or have a bad series. Like, that's going to happen. But, as we've gone over, you do have several guys in this lineup putting up big-time numbers. They're hitting home runs at a better pace. And yes, so is the rest of the league, but okay, fine. But so are the Cubs. They could not be going with the rest of the league. So you're glad that they are doing that as well. But I'm with you, and it's a tough spot for, admittedly, for the front office and for the overall roster construction group. But I do agree with you that I think that a lot of this can be not necessarily explained away, but it really is informed by the little injuries and the lack of depth. And I know that in a lot of these situations, right, you can look at Descalso, you can look at Rizzo with the back, you can look at Bryant and Hayward after the collision in the outfield, you can look at Baez with this heel thing that's been lingering since that series in Washington. It's tough. You don't want to put a guy on the 10-day DL if he's only going to miss a game or if he's fine, or, if like we saw with Javi, they put him at third in some of these games. It doesn't bother him as much, and then you can still hopefully get his bat involved in the game. It's a tough decision on some of these moves. But when you look at this season, it's difficult to deny, Brendan, that they have seemingly been playing a man down or multiple men down.
The entire year.
Entire year. And again, you don't want to burn Anthony Rizzo for 10 days if he's only, just needs a day to, get that back massaged or, whatever therapy they have going on with that type of stuff. I get it. And I know it's not that simple. But when you are constantly playing with a shortened bench, how many games have we seen this year, guys? Where
it's every week, I feel like someone goes down and you have this issue.
What was it, Saturday's game? Javi's in his hoodie, right? When opportunities are coming up, you're thinking, okay, well, if he's available, maybe he should pinch hit here. How many games have we seen like that? And it's not, it's not just Javi. Obviously, I just went through that list of where they're active and on the bench, but they're unavailable. And again, it's tough. I get it. But it does seem to be actively hurting the team that you have the 8 guys you're putting in the lineup, unless we're talking about that series in Houston when you have 9. You have those 8 guys in the lineup, and everybody on your bench is not really available to do anything. So it puts Joe in a bit of a box in a lot of these games, and it puts pressure on the guys that are in the lineup that, you have to be performing. And I agree with you, Brendan. This is not a knock on some of these guys in particular, but they need to have better depth than Mark.
You can't have Jim
Zagunis,
Adducci up with this team right now. I'm sorry, you just can't have that happen.
I agree with you, and it's also part of it is like we know from other situations like Mark Zagunis barely played. He barely got in there, and then you're asking him, a couple times a week basically to perform in clutch spots coming off the bench in a pinch hit role. Like that's a really tough assignment for some of these guys. So it's sort of just like a no-win proposition. And I think that they're trying to solve some of that. We saw them pick up Carlos González, you may remember from the Rockies, the majority of his time. And, I think that they're clearly trying to solve that issue. But, between not having a deep bench in the sense that you're bringing up guys with tons of major league experience or success, things like that, and constantly playing a man down, I think it's showing. I think that is definitely a point of influence for when you have inconsistent performances like we saw in St. Louis. Because, again, I'm with you. Like, I think on the whole, like, the body of work from this offense has been good. And I have not wavered in my, like, overall confidence, sentiment on the group or the team as a whole. Yeah. Like, it's a bad series in St. Louis. Like, it's not fun. It stinks. And they're in a bad stretch. Like, there's no sugarcoating it. But I as I've said before, and we've pretty much every year, Brendan, we go through stretches like this. Like, I don't get the doom and gloom. You're not gonna get it. We get pissed off, and we're a little fired up today, right? Like, this is one where Brendan's hand is hovering over the the expletive button.
I'm like pressing mute every 5 seconds over here, just in case.
Yeah.
Just in case. Yeah,
we have the FCC like closely monitoring.
Right? Yeah.
This one.
A few may slip out.
Again, like this team they go through that 10-series stretch and play really good baseball. They beat really good teams, and it's June 2nd. Like, they're a game and a half out of first place. Like, I think some of the doom and gloom really needs to be settled down. It's a little ridiculous, if you ask me. But that doesn't mean, like, this was frustrating. And like I said, like, you get beat up, like really beat up by Adam freaking Wainwright. I mean, he's blowing 91-mile-per-hour fastballs by people on pitch 120, Brendan. Like, that can't happen. Like, you walk 7 times. This team has certainly not had an on-base percentage problem. Like, their approach in a lot of respects is really good. They take their walks. Like, they're willing to make the pitcher work. But you just got to see more consistent results. And I do think that the depth issue, the playing a man down thing is catching up with him. But again, like, it's not an easy thing to monitor, but even just thinking about that, I mean, what is that, the last month or so, right, Brendan? Like, you've had Javi sticking on the bench, even though he's clearly, having lingering issues with that heel. You had Descalso stay with that ankle injury. You had Rizzo. You had Bryant. You had Hayward. Like, that's a lot of guys. Like,
you don't realize it until you say it out loud.
Yeah,
too.
just like
dealing with a lot of these
unavailable
injuries
at a decent clip, and I do think that it's causing some of these problems. But as far as the runner in scoring position thing, I have no idea, man. I've looked, I've tried to like get a sense of it, and like over this recent stretch, like the last few weeks here or so, their BABIP is insanely low with runners in scoring position, and that's not to say that they've only gotten unlucky. I'm definitely not saying that. There's been some bad at bats, there's been some bad contact, but it has been a sustained low. So I think that it soon should correct to a closer to normal outcome. But it is hard not to acknowledge that it has been a persistent issue of this team for the last couple seasons. And it definitely gets highlighted when you're in a stretch like they are now, where, they got the hit on Saturday to, sort of end that 20-plus at-bat streak or whatever it was with runners in scoring position, but it didn't even bring in a run. So it's like when you go through a stretch like that, it's really going to highlight, this has been an issue before, and it's been a glaring one over this stretch.
Yeah, and I think a part of the issue, too, is what you're seeing. You're seeing a team who is banged up, and they've been playing consistently to make some of the guys who are just not playing. So it's a combination of both. And just going right back to spring training, this is why going with Ian Happ at AAA few days before the season started was so shocking to me. Mm-hmm. Because you're reading these names off, no offense to Mark Zagunis or Jim Adducci, but you need better depth than
you weren't necessarily prepared for it.
They're not. Yeah, they're not prepared for it, and it's not a knock on them. The Cubs put them in a situation where it's very difficult to adjust.
Right.
So it's not a knock on them. It is Theo and the front office have to take responsibility here to put Joe Maddon too in this position where you don't have that depth. That's a hard task to do, and it's almost negligent to some degree to do that 3 days before spring training, to send Ian Happ down to Iowa 3 days and have no backup. Come on. And you look around the league, and Adam Jones is making $3 million. He has, 13 homers. He's batting .280 for the Diamondbacks, playing consistently in center field and corner outfield. You got to have a better backup plan than that. They don't have that right now, and that's why you're seeing Carlos González get signed, because the moment Descalso doesn't look to be the guy that you thought he was, that's an issue. The moment Ben Zobrist has his problem, that's an issue. And
right.
You rely on these two guys to have a significant contribution to the team. They're not there. Now you have no depth. They have no depth. And I think it does beg the question, should the Cubs go out and search for more depth? And I don't know if I'm necessarily there yet. You hope that Ian Happ can continue to play well. He's been better recently in Iowa. But I don't know if I'm there yet where you want to go out there and you want to make that trade to bring in more depth. I still think if Happ can come back to Wrigley, be kind of the same guy he was even last year, that's a huge addition to the team. If Bodie continues to play well, even though he didn't look too well in St. Louis, that should be a big boost to the team. But overall, for the immediate few series here, something has to give. I don't know if they need to put a Javi on the injured list. He looked better on Sunday's game, but the games before that he was limping. They have to do something here, because it does put added pressure on these guys to play every day, night game, day game, follow it up on the road. It's no fluke that they're having these issues right now against two teams who are good. I mean, the Cardinals have not been playing well recently, but they still have a quality team. To go from Houston to St. Louis, banged up, night game to day game consistently, that's very challenging. So it's, in one sense, it's no surprise. On the other hand, the Cubs got to prep better for this. There's a reason why teams like the Dodgers and the Astros, year in, year out, by June and July, no one's behind them, because they have insane depth in the Cubs right now. Hate to say it, they didn't prep for that. They didn't prep for it. They had injuries. They don't have the backups for it. They got a little screwed there, but at the same time, when you're sending down Ian Happ 3 days before spring training with no backup, this is kind of what you get. You get this perfect storm, and it does trickle down to affecting other people's performances on this team as a result. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not wavering in my confidence totally in the offense, but at some point they're going to have to figure out and address this depth issue, because it is a real issue that I think we do need to address.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there, and it's one of those things where that was one of the areas in the offseason when they didn't go out and spend on any of the big name free agents. Our sentiment was fine, that's totally fine, but let's fill in some of these cracks, right?
And Daniel Descalso was not the guy to do that.
Right.
I hate to say it, but
and I think that what they ended up doing was one of those things where it's you need this to go all the way correct for this to not be something you have to readdress once the season gets going, right?
Right.
Victor Caratini started off hot as the backup catcher, but then obviously gets hurt. And since he's come back, he hasn't been as hot, certainly, as he was like at the beginning of the season. You trade Listella, you go for Descalso, and again, like if Descalso plays like he did in 2018, if Ben Zobrist is with the team and not dealing, with this off the field situation, and potentially not coming back at all, we're still not really sure on that. Like if those things go that way, and Victor has a solid season and he cements that backup role, gives Wilson the ability to take some time off. You have guys like Bodie, etc., like excel in the roles that they're given. Like I think it could have worked, but it's just one of those things where the margin of error was
you have to
thin.
Be perfect.
Yeah, like you needed
you
Descalso to be that player he was in 2018. You needed Ben Zobrist to be somewhat close to his Ben Zobrist self that he's put up pretty consistently.
Which for a 38-year-old guy, that was not a guarantee too. I mean,
right, and unfortunately now you don't even know because he's just not playing. So I think that again, like it wasn't the absolute worst strategy coming in, but this is why we kind of belabored that point of I really wish they would have filled in some of these cracks here, or not just maybe put a Band-Aid on some of these things. If you're not going to go get Bryce Harper, right, fine, who cares, it's fine, but you gotta
go get someone
take
like
those steps to improve the team upon last year, where you can really go like, yes, we have taken a look at what happened last year with the offense. We've made a coaching change. We're going to have a philosophy change. We're going to get Chris Bryant healthy, and we've added this depth that we're coming in with just a miles better offense, and they have been much better. But you're looking at kind of where that depth issue and not going out and doing that in the offseason is, creating some problems for you. And again, like obviously they couldn't have foreseen the Ben Zobrist thing coming. It's a bad situation for everyone, right? And as we always have said in talking about this, we're wishing Ben the best, and I hope that he's able to get his personal affairs in order and get through this process. But looking at it from a baseball perspective, like it does affect the team, like whether you want to talk about it or not, like it does have a tangible effect on this team. So I'm with you. Like I have not wavered in my confidence with this group. I think you're looking at what Bryant is doing on the whole, Rizzo, Baez, Contreras, like they're having big seasons. You have a bunch of these guys who have already eclipsed their home run total. They're slugging more, and the hits with runners in scoring position will come.
What do you make of that, though? I think just quickly before we move on here. Yeah. So I really mentioned it a little bit. I think to a degree recently, the lack of hitting with runners in scoring position was a result of that lack of depth and playing every day, and that's what I just said. Mm-hmm. But there is another side to it that I think that I may have like an opinion on it, and that to some degree, I don't know if this is the right idea, but the focal point from this coaching staff front office in the offseason, and even in years past, we've talked about it, was situational hitting or opportunistic hitting. And we know from talking to Jordan Bastian, just seeing Joe Madden operate in spring training, they really put a ton of emphasis on capitalizing off of those guys on second and third base. And they're still not really doing it. And the argument is, well, they have one of the highest OBPs. That's what happens when you have guys on base consistently. I'm not really buying that, because when I watch these games, I don't know if you're the same way, Corey, maybe it's just my bias, I notice a very tangible difference in their approach. And in particular, I notice it from guys, especially like Wilson Contreras. I mean, it's for me, it's tangible when I see Willie up there. He's trying to do something completely different when the leverage is not as high, or whether it's going out the opposite field or just trying to make contact or whatever. Even Hayward, other guys as well. So in the back of my mind, I question whether or not there is too much emphasis on that from getting outside of your normal approach and adapting this different approach that you're not used to because there's men on base. And I don't know, I mean, look, I don't know if that's the right way to go about it. I don't even know if that's kind of just my, bias to a degree, but I do think it's been 3 years. There's been a lot of emphasis put on scoring with runners on base, and it hasn't worked. And I wonder what they're doing even today is just not optimal. Maybe it's more of a thing where just go to your normal approach. Don't try to get outside of what you've been doing well to get on base. The moment you get on base, you change this up. It's been a little problematic. So I don't know if that's a solution where you just adapt this normal approach. But when guys are on base, pitchers should not have better numbers. It's the opposite way. When guys are on base, the pitcher struggles more. For some reason, with the Cubs, the pitchers are doing better. And you have to question, okay, is this a systematic approach issue? Is this a random issue? And at this point, maybe a little bit of both, but I do think to some level it is a systematic issue.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to really pinpoint because you have such a wide variety of variables here. Like, obviously, you have 3 different hitting coaches now, all trying to solve this same issue. We tried it with John Malley in 2017, Chili Davis in 2018, and now Anthony Iapoce in 2019. And Iapoce's a student of Malley's, so their philosophies are obviously similar, but still different guys with different backgrounds, and obviously Chili being sort of the most drastic change of them, who was specifically brought in to solve that issue. And you also have very different guys in this lineup. Right. So, but we see it, it's not as though one person is necessarily coming through with all the hits with runners in scoring positions. So, you have guys who expand their zone a lot. You have guys who are more patient. You have guys who make a lot of contact, and it's not working for the moment for anybody. So, I don't know, man. I think, unfortunately, they might just be pressing right now. It's been a rough stretch for them just as a team. And, again, obviously you get into one of those holes where those numbers pile up. You've got an offer, that gets that big. Guys might just press. And I think, maybe you're right. In particular instances, guys feel the weight of the team not producing in those situations, and they're trying to do too much, and it leads to a change in approach, a bad approach, whatever it is. But I don't know. I wish I had the answer. I think if it were that easy to come up with an answer, we might not be having this discussion. But it's look, it's something like you said that clearly this team has prioritized fixing. They are aware that they have struggled with it. They have made coaching changes because of it. They have put an emphasis on it. So I hope that it normalizes a little bit. Again, like in that 0 for stretch, like their BABIP was really low. And I think, you probably don't deserve as bad of an outcome. And going forward, you just have to hope for better results. But I think as we kind of wrap up on the offense here, again, I think you and I are in agreement here, Brendan, that our confidence in this group has not wavered. It's just, acknowledging there have been these inconsistent stretches. There have been just these poor performances. There's no mincing words, right? And I think that in analyzing the team and praising them for the stuff that they would do well, you have to be able to pause and say, this was a bad effort this weekend. There were some piss poor at-bats in this series, and just an inability to cash in on other good work that you were doing, inability to cash in on, pitchers who had been struggling, and who you just, you need better results with. And they're, it just feels like all too familiar a feeling in some of these games where, they have runners on with no outs or 1 out, and you get the bare minimum out of it. There's a couple times in the St. Louis series where you've got runners on, they had the bases loaded in that one situation, and you come away with 1 run, and it just doesn't feel like they're executing at that level where they're really capitalizing on some of these opportunities. And in a series like this with the Cardinals, where all the games were really right there within reach of winning, it really costs you that you don't cash in on those opportunities. So I think that this group is going to continue to put up a good season. You're going to have to do some tinkering, and I'd like to see them, come in with a stronger group bench, a stronger level of depth, and you've got to sort of think on your feet here to address the Zobrist situation. You also have to be kind of evaluating this Descalso thing and what your feeling on that is going forward, because he's been really bad.
And he's not making that much money too. So I'm not suggesting to DFA him now, because I understand the ankle injury could be a prohibitive factor in him being good right now. But his overall numbers, guys, this is brutal. This cannot be on your team. He's batting 200 after that. He's batting 200. He's a 264 weighted on base average. He's created 40% fewer runs than just a league average player. He's not a good defender. He's aging. A lot of the things he did well last year, he's not doing right now. He can't be getting these at-bats. And the trade deadline is in, 8 weeks or so? So we're going to probably be hearing some rumors, but at some point, it does beg the question whether or not him being on the team right now is a bad thing. And maybe making a trade right now is something the Cubs should consider, but it's so frustrating, Corey, to see these numbers. I mean, come on, their bench is just so inadequate right now.
Yeah, and it puts and sort of the reason we're putting so much emphasis on that is because the lack of that depth and the lack of production out of some of these guys puts a ton of pressure. You don't want this much pressure on guys like Almora or Bodie, where it's basically if they're not performing, it really looms large, and you don't want them to have that pressure. We just came off in the last episode talking about when these guys get on hot stretches and they're putting up good numbers, you want them to be able to keep playing and try to keep developing in their young careers. These guys are young. These guys are under control for a while, and you want to give them that opportunity to continue growing. But when when Zobrist isn't there and Descalso's not performing and you have a different guy unavailable on the bench every day because of injury, it really puts a lot of pressure on these guys, which is just not how you would draw that up. You don't want the success or failure to the offense to hinge so much on some of these guys performing at an everyday consistent level. You'd like to be able to still kind of massage their usage and help them develop in that, but it's harder to do when you have a series like this in particular against the Cardinals, where it's just sort of a lineup wide funk that's going around. But let's go to this bullpen situation, and pretty much the situation is just that Pedro Strop in 3 outings with Iowa, I don't believe he's given up a run. He's looked good. Stuff looks good. He seems to be healthy. So his return is likely imminent. I think a lot of people expected him to be back after just that second outing. So the fact that he has this third one would likely suggest that, he did throw, unfortunately, in those first 2 outings. It was a very small amount of pitches. I think a lot of guys go up there in these minor league games. They see a guy like Pedro Strop, and they're trying to jump on him early. And he doesn't get to throw a lot of pitches. I think in one of those games, it might have been under 20 pitches or something, I think, total for those first 2 outings. So they likely wanted to just get him a little more work while he's there and with the team. But he should be back soon. Tony Barnett starting his rehab in the minors. And you have these Craig Kimbrel rumors floating around. So I do want to get your thoughts, Brendan, on just the general state of the bullpen. We did see some good performances for them over the course of this weekend. I think on the whole, the bullpen was pretty good, save for a couple of individual performances. But as we talked about, I think the bullpen issue to me is pretty simple, and I've said this for a while now. You have the makings of a good bullpen, you just need some higher leverage arms, and one of those will be Pedro Strop. As we talked about, Brandon Morrow has restarted his attempt at the rehab. Nobody's counting on that, but we'll see. It's happening, so I'm just alerting you that is happening again. So one of them would be Pedro Strop, and I think, you need at least 1 to 2 more, and then if you can have that kind of back end be Strop, Cishek, and, probably 2-ish other high leverage arms, that's a very quality group. And then you have guys like Brad Brock, Brandon Kinsler, Mike Montgomery, etc., Carl Edwards. coming in lower leverage spots, working in different areas. I think you've got the makings of a very good pen, but I think you do need to address it. So where are you on the bullpen as a whole, and what do you make of this Craig Kimbrel situation that was reported to us by Ken Rosenthal from The Athletic, that the Cubs are interested, and the fact that they are, I think he confirmed it in this article. It was a little hard to tell as he didn't directly say it, but he's heavily implying that the Cubs are not paying Ben Zobrist while he is out on the restricted list. So that does free up some money, as we kind of speculated before, if that was the case. And Ken Rosenthal seemingly suggesting that that is the case.
It sounds as if, even from Madden, that Zobrist not coming back will free up that money. Of course, you want Kimbrel. I think them addressing and talking to Kimbrel is something that seems obvious. But beyond Kimbrel, I'm a little frustrated how they've handled the bullpen the last 3 weeks. And you can look at examples with Kyle Ryan getting high leverage spots, but that's not where I want to direct the focus. I'm frustrated by their I don't even know what the word is. I want to say procrastination, but that's almost not the right word. I do not like how two guys in particular, Rowan Wick and James Norwood, are in AAA right now. You look at their numbers, they're both striking out guys in double digits per 9 innings. They both have walk rates under 3 batters per 9 innings, and they come up and they look good. Rowan Wick had one outing, looked pretty good. James Norwood, we've seen him a few times. He has great stuff. And I sit there and I watch guys like Brad Brock and Brandon Kinsler, and to their credit, have had somewhat successful careers, but I watch them and they're blowing games, and they look pretty bad recently. And it does beg the question, like, what are we waiting for here? Like, why? The solution seems possible if we give guys like Rowan Wick and James Norwood and some of these younger guys a bigger chance. Not saying throw them in high leverage situations, but at least give them more of a shot here. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if getting rid of Brad Brock is the right idea, but I was discussing this with others, and it did make me realize, like, maybe getting these guys on 1-year deals like a Brad Brock or like a Brandon Kinsler, that it's hindering the development and the opportunities for guys who could take charge of the bullpen. I think Brian Smith in particular expressed the idea that someone like Rowan Wick is a major league player, and the fact that they have gone after these 1-year guys maybe is frustrating and hindering their development. And I really see that. So I mean, my thoughts on the bullpen haven't changed. I'm with you. In 2 months, the bullpen will undoubtedly look drastically different. Once you throw Pedro Strop back in there, they're going to make a trade for another guy or 2 or 3. Craig Kimbrel, if he's acquired, of course, changes the depth and structure of the bullpen. But ultimately, I think right now, there has to be an immediate solution, Corey. I cannot watch these guys get in high leverage situations when they're not really suited for it right now. I like Kyle Ryan. I like the unorthodox release point. We've talked about it. I've written about it. But to see him go into these high leverage situations, it's not suited for his stuff. It's not suited for him right now in his stage of his career. I don't think it's fair to him. I don't think it's fair whatsoever to Joe Maddon to handle this bullpen like this when you have no one outside of Steve Cishek to go to. I do not think that's fair whatsoever. So my underlying issue is that 2 guys, and maybe more, are just not getting the chances that I personally want to see. I understand why. I know it's very difficult to go out there and say, okay, well, to get these guys up, you have to go DFA someone that might be difficult to DFA, and I get that, but it goes back to even the preseason or spring training or offseason philosophy of getting these guys, trying to get the depth, but that depth is maybe hurting your depth, ironically, by stalling the development of guys who could be better than these 1-year guys. So that's where I'm at, Corey.
Yeah, I'm with you. And again, I think the real key is you just have some of these guys in the wrong spot. I think you're dead on with a guy like Kyle Ryan. We've talked about he had a really good stretch to start his run with the Cubs, and he's given you some good innings. But you're competing in a division that you won 95 games in last year and didn't win the division. And some of the teams around just the Brewers have gotten better. You can't, in a one-run game, Kyle Ryan pitching to two righties, right? Or two guys hitting right-handed. Dexter Fowler's a switch hitter. Yeah. But that's not good enough. I'm sorry. Like, and again, it's not to knock Kyle Ryan. I think you move him down a few rungs in a bullpen as a left-handed option. It can be fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But you got to have better high leverage options. This is a one-run game on the road against a division rival, a division opponent, a division contender. If you have the aspirations that this Chicago Cubs team does, you need to have better options than Kyle Ryan. Sorry, that's just how I see it. Like, it's not good enough. It's the same with some of these guys off the bench. You need better options than Mark Zagunis and Jim Adducci and Kyle Ryan. It's not good enough. That's how I feel. Straight up. Like, some of these options just are not good enough. You need to do better.
I almost wonder, too, that maybe it made more sense to go out in the offseason. And I get what they were trying to do. And you get the depth. You get Brad Brock. You get someone like Brandon Kinsler back via trade, and you gamble with that option. I get what they were trying to do there in terms of building that depth, but I wonder if they did it backwards. Like, what if they went out there and they got guys on minor league options or minor league deals, you keep them in AAA, and you give the first dibs to someone like Rowan Wick or James Norwood and see how they do for the first few weeks, and then you adjust. Because the moment that you bring someone like Brad Brock in or these other guys, they have no other options left. The moment they start sucking, you have one choice. You either keep them or you have to get rid of them. You have no other choice there. So I do wonder if they did it backwards to some degree, and that's my frustrating point right there. Is just, man, like I really want to see more Wick. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I think you're going to get into those problems soon, because as we discussed, you're gonna need to find room for Strop. You have Tony Burnett trying again. You have guys like Junichi Tozawa, who was on a minor league deal, like you're talking about, performing well in Iowa. And I throw this out there. I know that there's definitely nuance to how to use him, given how valuable he is. But I do just want to read these Adbert Alzolay numbers. His last start the other day, he goes 6 innings, allows 1 hit, no runs. He strikes out 8 and walks 1 in his last 3 starts for the Iowa Cubs. 17 innings pitched, 6 hits, 2 earned runs, 23 strikeouts, 2 walks. That's good for a 1.06 ERA. So we don't have to get into the nuance of, how to use him. Should he be in the bullpen? Should he continue starting? But when you have your top pitching prospect performing like this, lights out baseball, wowing everybody, kind of the talk of the minor league portion of the Cubs world, it is going to kind of, get some of the, like, that glaring eye emoji is what I think of when I see those numbers, where it's just like, I don't really know exactly what to do with this, but this is pretty interesting. And, as we're sort of searching for answers here. So you've got a lot of names. And, you brought up some other ones, Rowan Wick, and an example, like a lot of names sort of trying to crack this major league bullpen. You're going to have to start making some decisions at some point, because I think you've got some guys itching to raise the bar a little bit and take over some of those higher leverage innings. And it'll be interesting to see how the Cubs proceed with that. But just as a definitive stance, if you can get past this period, not give up a draft pick, not trade any prospects, I have expressed concern with Craig Kimbrel, right? Like, I think his second half numbers, his performance in the playoffs wasn't as strong as the sort of, as simply sharing that he's one of the best closers in Major League Baseball, like history.
Yeah.
I think that's those two things you kind of need to acknowledge separately. They can both be true. He can be one of the best relievers in Major League history while also not have looked his best last season. But you do it. Like, you just do it. You need the bullpen help. You need high leverage arms. If you sign Craig Kimbrel for whatever it takes to sign him for half a season, maybe, if you could do it. Because I think one of the things with him is that he wants to be the closer, and the Cubs can do that for him. You can come in and be the closer for the Chicago Cubs. Like, you do it.
Day one,
If he's not great, fine, join the join the club, right? Like, okay, add him to the pile. But I think at this point, I think it was certainly a point of debate in the offseason, and I understood if people didn't want to do it. I had concerns about him as well. But now, if you don't have to trade any prospect capital for him, if you don't have to trade any major league talent for him, and you don't have to give up a draft pick, just money, you got to do it. Or at least you have to be at the table at the forefront of this conversation. If someone is blowing him away with an offer, whatever, right? Fine. You don't have to throw all your chips in this one pot. But at this point, I think you have to go for this, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say if he wants $50 million over like 3-4 years, I may be a little bit more hesitant.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If he's getting crazy, okay, fine.
Yeah, and man, it's difficult. It's a difficult situation here. I almost am tempted even to give him that contract, but I am worried about his walk rate. 2 of the last 3 years, his walk rate's been almost 5 batters per game. That's an issue. Everything else is fine. His velocity was fine for most of the year. I know some people mentioned that, but his velocity was around 98 most of the year, so that's not an issue for him. I will say though, Corey, at least the rotation has been pretty good though.
Yes.
And the rotation was, I mean, not lights out, but a step in the right direction. Yeah, really good. And I gotta say, I am enjoying watching Jose Quintana pitch. Just to before we get into Darvish, which we will briefly here, but Q is just hammering the strike zone.
Yeah,
fastball
much more
after
aggressive.
fastball, much more. I love his look on the mound. We did not see it the last 2 years, whatever it was, and we're seeing it now, and it's a pleasure to watch him. And that is the guy who was on the White Sox, and that's the guy who I thought we were going to get. So I want to throw it out there. We've been somewhat critical of Q, not critical, but just expecting more. We're getting it. Let's recognize that. He's been phenomenal. Love what he's seen. And then on the other hand, too, with Yu Darvish. Okay, Yu Darvish, for the first time this year, I think, he had his fastball command. It happened,
Whoa.
Corey.
We need an audio drop for that, like a horn or something.
It happened, and after that first inning, I was having a stroke over there because we were not seeing it. But he comes back in that second inning, and he's hammering fastball after fastball, two-seamer, with command. And he threw half of his pitches as fastballs, whereas in recent starts, he's been mostly 60%. 50% with cutters and sliders. So he trusted it a little bit more. And there was one other pitch too I do want to bring up. He had this 93 mile per hour two-seamer, which I thought it was a two-seamer. I tweeted it out with a video that you made, Corey. And then about 2 hours later, my phone starts to vibrate like for 2 straight minutes. And I'm out to dinner with my boss on a work event, so I'm not looking at my phone. I get into my Uber, I take my phone out, and you text me, hey, did you look at your mentions? I'm like, what are you talking about right now? And of course, I open my phone up. I have 250 notifications, and Yu Darvish tweets at me that was a splitter, not a two-seam fastball. So Yu Darvish is throwing 93 mile per hour splitters to go with his 96 mile per hour fastballs with his cutter, slider, curve, and changeup. He threw 8 pitches that start. That, Corey, is the Yu Darvish we thought we were going to get. That is the Yu Darvish that Theo Epstein signed, who said he was a premier strikeout pitcher of our generation. That was Yu Darvish. That is what I'm talking about. That is a sign that gives me more confidence. Not the start before that, where he had a successful start, but he did so on 1 pitch. This start, he did it on 8 different pitches. That is what I'm talking about, and that is why now that my ears perk up. I get a little bit more confidence in him going forward for the first time this year, I think.
Yeah, this was a good start. And again, it's unfortunate, he has to get lifted for the pinch hitter to try to get, the offense going. Because I think he probably, he was at 93 pitches, probably could have gone 1 more inning. But this was a good start. He walks a few guys, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world. And he only allows 3 hits. So, Yeah, I thought this was a really good start for him. It would have been a really nice one to, just get a nice clean win for you. He has a quality start.
He deserved it, though,
and get
too.
him that W. Yeah, that's what he deserved, and I think that would have been a nice little building block for the whole series. But again, this is just sometimes how it is, right? Like you're praying for better pitching when the offense is scoring 5-6 runs a game, and then we have a weekend here where we're praying for any offense because the pitching is really good. It's sometimes baseball is just like that. You just can't get things to line up, and I do think important to note, and hopefully we see a similar trend with Jon on Monday, but Cole Hamels really good on Sunday, a really good start, and I think that expecting him to be as good as he was in that second half for the Cubs in 2018, maybe a bit optimistic, but also, in this stretch where his command hasn't been as good and he's been going, shorter on the innings totals and stuff. I think also that definitely was not certainly where we expected him to be. And I think we kind of expected that just to be a bad stretch. And he comes back on Sunday and definitely makes it look that way. He was great on Sunday. Takes an undeserved L. He doesn't even give up an earned run, and he takes the loss in this game, so that always sucks. But 7 innings, his season ERA now sitting at 3.62 for a guy that you got for next to nothing, and at his age, you're taking that all day. He's been very good on the whole. Very good for the Chicago Cubs in his time here. So just nice to see him get back out there, have a really good start. And they needed him to play stopper on Sunday, and really he did. Again, the offense just doesn't make it stick, but that was good to see. So yeah, it's again, everything ebbs and flows, but good to see, kind of after a bad stretch, this trio who got to go in St. Louis, really answer the call and get back to throwing good baseball. And I think, kind of restore, I think we really haven't wavered in being pretty confident and realistic with this group throughout the whole year. But it's just nice to see after that stretch them get back out there, quickly turn it around, and shift the loud worrying to a different portion of the team for now. So that's that's always good.
Entire year.
It's off of their back for the moment. We can shift it somewhere else.
Yeah, and then 3 weeks later we'll be doing the opposite again.
Right.
Oh boy. Okay, so let's preview this upcoming series and makeup game against the Los Angeles Angels on Monday and the Colorado Rockies after the Angels. And by the way, you can get tickets to both of those games against the Rockies and Angels through SeatGeek, because with millions of live event tickets and a price match guarantee, SeatGeek proves there's a better way. You can search sports, live music, comedy, and more, Cubs games, Bears games, whatever you want. SeatGeek has the tickets you're looking for all in one place. Why is SeatGeek better than the rest? Well, a quick look to the App Store shows over 50,000 5-star reviews. How is that for customer satisfaction? We just know it's a better process. SeatGeek pulls millions of tickets from all over the web. Then it rates each deal on a scale of 1 to 10 on an interactive map. So, for example, green dots on their map are good deals. Red dots are overpriced deals. And every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets with confidence. I always use SeatGeek, whether it's for baseball games, basketball games, hockey games, whatever. I use SeatGeek. My friends use SeatGeek. I buy tickets for my friends. I send them to their phone within 5 minutes. A really easy process to do. Best of all, our listeners, you guys, get $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. Download the SeatGeek app today and use promo code CUBSRELATED for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code CUBSRELATED for $10 off your first purchase. Okay. So that one game against the Los Angeles Angels will take place at 3:05 p.m. Central Time on Monday. A weird start time there, Corey. But Jon Lester will take the mound, who's 3-4 with a 3.59 ERA. Cam, this last name is kind of unfamiliar. I believe is Bedrosian is how you pronounce it. He's 2-3 with a 3.08 ERA. Mike Trout will probably play in this game. As you may remember, he missed the previous series at Wrigley due to an injury. Now he's healthy, so that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you want to look at that. After the Angels game, Colorado comes to town, who's 31-27, and Kyle Hendricks will take the mound for that first game set, which begins at 7:05 p.m. Central Time, Jeff Hoffman will be Kyle Hendricks' opponent, who is 1-1 with a 7.2 ERA. This is Hoffman's fourth start of the year, so he's not been used the entire year as a starter. And then on Wednesday, during the second game of the series, Darvish will look to follow up his very impressive performance against St. Louis. Darvish has a 2-3 overall record on the year with a 5.02 ERA. He'll be facing German Marquez from Colorado, who is just having a phenomenal year. He's 6-2 at 3.48 ERA. Has some pretty wicked stuff. If my memory serves correct, the Cubs have had issues against him in the past, so that might be a difficult game. And then on Thursday, to finish off the 3-game set, we'll have Jonathan Gray, if you may remember, was drafted right by Chris Bryant in that famous draft that year. Gray is 5-4 with a 4.11 ERA. Jose Quintana faces Gray, who's 4-4 with a 3.78 ERA. That game starts at 1:20 p.m. Central. And then just to give you a quick preview after that series, it does not get easier, guys. I hate to say it does not get easier. St. Louis comes to town for another series, and then the Cubs will fly off to the West Coast. Always difficult for the Cubs to do. They'll go to Colorado for another game, 3-game set. And then the Dodgers, they'll go to LA. So it's going to be a tough stretch of baseball here for the Cubs. Unfortunate timing, given they haven't been playing that well, but they're going to have to get through it here. A quick wrap-up on the standings. The Cubs are in second place, unfortunately, and they're now 1.5 games back of Milwaukee, who's 34 and 26. They're a game and a half up of the Cardinals, at least, who are 30 and 28, and the Pirates are now 3.5 games back of the Cubs, but they have lost a few games recently. They're 28 and 30, and the Reds, I gotta say, the Reds keep sticking around. They're still below 500, but believe it or not, they have the second best pitching staff rotation according to ERA in the National League. The Reds are 27 and 32. They're 6.5 games back of Milwaukee, and they're 5 games back of the Cubs. So that's what I got there. Pretty simple for me, Corey. You got to take advantage of this home series. The Cubs always have issues traveling to the West Coast. So look, I don't want to say you have to come away with a winning series, but I do have some concern once they travel to the West Coast. Things are not going to get easier. So you got to take advantage of these situations. Colorado's a good team. They're not the greatest team, but they're still a good team. You got to win these games, Corey.
Well, yeah, you want to have a good showing at home here before you head out to the West. But I will say that, me specifically, but also, Brendan will try as he might. We'll get things sorted when they get out to the West Coast. I'll have some words with them at Dodger Stadium.
No words with their fans, though, please.
No words with the Dodger fans.
No.
But we'll get things sorted once we see them in person. That's really what they need. I mean, we go back to all these conversations, and I think really what they need is me watching them in person more often. So
what about me?
I don't know. Jury's still out on
that. I may not go to those games.
Correlation is not causation.
Yeah, I don't want to risk it.
No, you gotta turn things around, and really nothing specific other than we need to clean some of this up. We've talked about a little bit of the sloppiness, and it persists in this St. Louis series, and it's got to stop. That's really the only thing that I would actually get, sort of definitive about, right? Like the starting pitching, the offense, the bullpen, things are going to be inconsistent. You're going to have great performances, bad performances. You look at the overall body of work, you look at the overall roster, and you make conclusions on that. But the one thing that I will be definitive on and say this needs to stop is some of this sloppiness and letting runs score without making the other team do anything. Again, yeah. I brought this up. But that first run on Friday scores, it's a sac fly. You get 2 walks, and you move the runners around and a sac fly. The Cardinals don't get any hits, and they lead that game 1-0. You look at the game on Sunday, and the winning run scores because Mike Montgomery picks off Kolten Wong, and they can't execute the throw and tag at second base, so he gets to second, and then Matt Carpenter gets a pinch hit single. So they get the single to bring in the run, but you're putting a runner in scoring position for free. And it's happening too much. You see in this game as well, Wilson Contreras throwing a ball into center field that led to the first Cardinals run on Sunday at, Kolten Wong gets a sacrifice fly that brings him in. He was only at third base because Wilson Contreras hurled the ball, 5 feet over Javi Baez's head into center field. And this isn't to put any of the focus on one player. Unfortunately enough, Brendan, this type of stuff has been spread around, which isn't great. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but it's all just to say, and you don't want to relate everything to the 2016 team. The 2016 team did win the World Series, but you don't want to always just say, well, the 2016 team did this, because that's not productive, right? But one of the hallmarks of that team, as we go through the years and we look back on that team, one of the hallmarks is going to be that team was relentless in not doing stuff like that. They were relentless about taking extra outs, taking extra bases, making these little plays, right? The tags, the cutting off balls in the alleys, keeping guys to singles, making clean throws, picking guys off. The catchers are picking guys off. The pitchers are picking guys off. They were relentless about stuff like this. And this is just not characteristic of this particular group. And you got to clean it up. You cannot be getting beat in one-run games by multiple runs that are only possible because you help the other offense along. It's got to stop. You got to clean that up. And if you're going to go through these stretches where the offense is inconsistent or doesn't come through with runners in scoring position, but this is the type of stuff that you can prevent. It has nothing to do with that. It's just a matter of executing clean plays. You go back to Descalso dropping that ball in the rundown. That stuff can't happen. It just can't. So you got to clean that up, and as you go home, and like you said, this is a tough stretch. You're going to play some good teams. West Coast road trips are difficult for pretty much every team, and I think every sport, right? That's a thing, the West Coast trip. So the one thing you can control is cleaning that stuff up and executing the simple plays that you need to execute and just not making it any easier for your opponent. But it starts at home. Let's get Lester, back on the right track, have a good start, follow up Hamels and kind of, putting that bad stretch behind them. Take this makeup game with the Angels, officially win that series, Brendan, that was part of that stretch. The only non-win in that 10-game stretch, the tie. And we'll retroactively call that, an 11-game, an 11 series or a 10-series winning streak. But start with that, take the series after, and, then get ready for this tough stretch. This team is still very good. That has not changed. This team is very good, and I want to see them show that in this stretch. It's a tough stretch, but they're built for it. They're ready for it, and I'd like to see them show us that. So that's really where I'm at. And with that, I think that's all we have for you. This is I liked it a lot better, Brendan, when we were just covering series that the Cubs took 2 or 3 or swept. Call me crazy, but that was more fun for me. It's a little easier, I guess, to figure out what we're talking about on these podcasts when there's sort of a kind of clear issue staring out back at you from these series, but it is what it is. So let's, as Joe Madden is always fond of saying, let's ball this series up and toss it in the nearest trash bin and move on. So as always, we thank you guys for listening through the ups and the downs. You guys are always there with us, and we are happy to have you joining us for all of these episodes. As always, you can find us on all major podcast platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and if we are not available on one where you like to listen to podcasts, just let us know, and we will do our best to get us on there. But we do thank you for your support and for your listenership, and as always, go Cubs.